My parents bailed on me after their divorce years later. Out of the blue, I got $1 million from my grandpa. Now they're back, demanding money for my half-siblings and my dad's debts. I was 21 when my family bailed on me. When I was around 12, my parents got separated. Caught me off guard because it seemed fine between them. Then one day, they both sat me down and said they were getting divorced. I thought they were pulling my leg. I had a different idea of what a divorce was like. My friends told me that when their parents got divorced, it was a year of fighting and yelling. In my case, it was a silent divorce. They said their parents both liked someone else. Mom would be moving out with her new boyfriend, while Dad's mistress would move into our house. They would have shared custody of me, since both Mom and Dad would be living 2 miles apart. I could visit them weekly. I didn't know what to do. I didn't really have a say in the situation. My family was falling apart, and all I could do was sit and cry. My parents promised they'd be my top priority. They promised all sorts of things like getting me the latest video games, taking me on vacations, and getting me anything I wanted. I wish I could make them understand that I didn't want any of those things. I just wanted to live with them in the same house as a family. It was too tough for them to do that. I saw Mom packing her things and leaving the house, and then I saw Dad's mistress unloading her truck and setting up in my parents' bedroom. Mom and Dad got separated, but they got along pretty well. Stepmom had twin boys almost the same age as mine. They both hated me, and I hated them just as much. My mom's boyfriend had a daughter from his previous marriage, but she was living with her mother. I thought about spending more time with Mom, but soon after she moved out, she got pregnant with her boyfriend's child. Things got weird and complicated with my boyfriend's baby, and I didn't feel welcome there. His mom and her husband would get uncomfortable around me, and they'd fight in front of me, which I hated. I felt the same way at my dad's house because my stepmom and her sons hated me. So, I started living more and more with my aunt, who's also my godmother. She's 10 years older than my dad, and she lived alone, so I'd visit her every now and then. After shuffling between the 3 houses for a year, I finally moved in with my aunt. It took my parents more than 3 months to realize that I was living with Aunt. Mom thought I was with Dad, and Dad thought I was with Mom. They didn't bother checking on me during this time because they were both so busy with their families that they forgot I existed. My aunt was a real savior. She made me feel loved and wanted. She would take me in and make me feel at home. I used to go with her to dinner and movies, and I'd tag along on her vacations during the summer. We'd visit Grandpa at his farm in the countryside. It was fun living with her. At first, Dad was sending my monthly allowance to Aunt, but he eventually stopped. Sometimes Aunt would remind them, and sometimes she wouldn't. I felt bad for piling up on her, so I started working for her and earning my living. She had a plant nursery. I worked there after school. She helped out with household chores, took out the trash, and even ran errands for her. It was fun living with her. Meanwhile, my parents forgot they had a son. They even forgot my birthdays, but my aunt reminded them. She'd call and say, "I love you so much." Sometimes I heard Aunt calling and telling them that I was sick, but none of them showed up. They didn't even show up to my school's graduation day. It was my aunt who came to cheer me up when she called them to. They'd call me and apologize for not saying hi to me at school. I got so resentful of them that I stopped answering their calls. Then they stopped calling me, and they were blaming me for not answering. I said, "If you guys want to play the blame game, go for it. I'm not going to let that affect me. I don't want you guys in my life after school." I went to college and moved out from Aunt's place. I try to visit her every few months, and I make sure to show up on her birthdays and holidays because she's also gotten attached to me over the years. I'm in my final year at university. 3 months ago, my grandpa on my dad's side passed away. It was a terrible moment for both my aunt and me. We were both closest to him. My dad and my other uncles barely visited him. The irony is that they all turned up for his funeral and at the lawyer's office to see his will, unfortunately for them. Grandpa bequeathed his stuff to Aunt, his 150-acre farm, the farmhouse, and a cool $1 million in cash. He gave the rest to a charity, which was tough, but if you know his side of the story, it makes sense. I'll talk about it another time. Basically, Grandpa was sick for a long time and wanted to meet his sons. Aunt asked her brothers to visit Grandpa, but none of them showed up and didn't stick around in his final days. I moved out of my parents' place for college, but I still took care of them. I called them and asked them to come to my dorm, and they came. They got the house and they called me home. She said she was going to give me the $1 million my grandpa left her. I was super happy, but honestly, it was more because of how much she cared about me. When I was living with her, I used to complain about how I wanted to start my own company and hire employees. He gave me the money and asked me to use it for my dream venture. I just gave her a hug and cried. If not for her, my life would have been miserable. It didn't take long for my parents to find out. All of a sudden, they started showering me with their unconditional love. They started calling and checking on me. I asked them to back off. I don't want you guys back in my life. Last week, Dad showed up at my dorm. Of course, he got the address from my aunt. I bet none of them remember which university I'm studying. He said he was so proud that I would be graduating this year and sang praises about me. Then he asked why I wasn't visiting his home. I asked him when he had last called. He didn't say anything for a minute, and then said, "Oh, you're still mad at us for the divorce. Come on, move on. We both love you. Your mother also misses you." He then said he'd drive me home and we could have dinner together. I told him to back off. I bet none of them remember which university I'm studying. He said he was so proud that I would be graduating this year, and after singing my praises, he asked why I wasn't visiting his home. I asked him when was the last time he had called. He stood silent, then said, "Oh, you're still mad at us for the divorce. Come on, move on. We both love you. Your mother also misses you. Let me drive you home, and we can have dinner together." I said, "Back off. The only family I have is my aunt. You both abandoned me long before, so quit showing off your fake love. I know why you are here. That $1 million brought you here, right?" He remained silent and said he had no ulterior motive except for love. He was here to say sorry and wanted me back in his life. He said he had heard my graduation was nearing, and he was here to ensure that I invited them, unlike at school graduation day, when I didn't call either of them. I hated having any conversation with him. My only family is my aunt. You two ditched me a long time ago, so don't try to act all loving. I know why you're here. That $1 million brought you here, right? He didn't say much, but he said he had no hidden agenda, just love for me. He said he was here to say sorry and wanted me back in his life. He said he heard my graduation was coming up, and he was here to make sure I invited them, unlike my school graduation day when I didn't call either of them. I couldn't stand talking to him, so I bailed on him halfway through, saying I had class. Then I got a voicemail from Mom. She said she was expecting an invite for my graduation day. She said she and Dad couldn't attend college, so they always dreamed of me going to college. She was really excited that I was able to cut through it. The thing is, I don't want either of them at my big day. I told my aunt about this, and she said it was up to me, but she suggested I reconcile with my parents, but I'm not sure what to do. I also don't know if they're reconciling for money or if they're genuinely happy for me getting a university degree. Update. Hello, sorry for the late update. Life's been busy. Good news. I graduated from university and got a job. Thank you. Now, let me start by answering some of the common questions I got in the comments. First, people asked me about my aunt and her family and how she took care of me for years. As I said in my first post, my aunt is 10 years older than my dad. When I moved in with her, she was in her late 50s. She was single. Her husband died in an accident when I was a little kid, maybe 1 or 2 years old. She has a daughter who moved out in her teens for medical school. She's a cardiologist now and is settled in the UK, so she has been living alone. She was able to take care of me for so many years. As I mentioned in my initial post, my aunt is 10 years older than my dad. When I moved in with her, she was in her late 50s. She was single. Her husband died in an accident when I was very young, maybe 1 or 2 years old. She has a daughter who had moved out in her teens for medical school. She's a cardiologist now and is settled in the UK, so she has been living alone. She did date any men after her husband's death. Her daughter and I tried to set her up with a few men, but she absolutely denied it. She said she loved her plants and was happy nursing them. Some of you said I was too harsh on my parents. You're all right. They do have the freedom to leave choose their partner. But it is never justified to ignore your children after your new family comes into your life. My parents did the same. After my parents' divorce, my daughter and I tried to set her up with a few guys, but she refused. She said she loved her plants and was happy taking care of them. Some of you said I was too harsh on my parents. You're right. They have the right to get separated and remarry. But they shouldn't ignore their kids after their new family comes into the picture. My parents did the same thing. They neglected me for their new family. At first, they said I would stay 1 week at Dad's and 1 week at Mom's. But we were following this schedule. Sometimes, they would be like, "It's my time again to have you." Then, they would always plan without me. Their dinner plans would always be after I left. They would even talk like this in front of me. "Oh, this way is here. Let's go out next week." How would you feel when your parents behave like this? I think I have spoken. So, about Mom, she got pregnant a few months after she moved in with her boyfriend. They do PDA in front of me, and it was just too much. One time, they took me on a 2-day trip, and they made me stay inside the room while they went outside to sunbathe. They'd ask me to sit on the balcony when they were in the room, but I was a kid, so I knew exactly what was going on. About Mom, that within a few months of her moving in with her boyfriend, she got pregnant. They indulged in PDA in front of me, which was unbearable. They once took me on a 2-day trip with them. They made me sit inside the room for the whole 2 days while they went outside sunbathing. When they were in the room, they would ask me to sit on the balcony outside. I was 11, so I knew exactly what was going on inside. I mean, I could hear them doing gross things. I know, and that man is not even your father, so how do you expect me to stick around? I stopped going to Mom after that. Dad was still better than Mom. Sometimes, he tried to include me in the plans, but his stepsons would throw tantrums at him. Then he would say, "Okay, skip this one. Maybe next week, Dad and son could go fishing." That next week would never come because the next week, I would be at Mom's soon. I realized my parents had some sort of agreement that whenever they had to get rid of me, they would say, "Let's do it next week." And then next week, I would be the other one's responsibility. They'd tag me along on their family vacations, and it was so horrible. On the first day, we all went out, and his wife and her sons kept him busy. I felt so neglected, even for the family pictures. They'd ask me to take theirs, but I was in none of the pictures. I realized that my parents had some sort of agreement that whenever they had to get rid of me, they would say, "Let's do it next week." And then the next week, I would be the other one's responsibility. Once he was able to tag me along on their family vacation, it was so horrible. On the first day, we all went out, and his wife and her sons kept him busy, and I felt so much neglected. Even for the family pictures, they would ask me to take theirs. I was in none of the pictures with them. There were just 4 pictures of me in 3 of them, and I was alone in one, and with Dad in another. I guess now I've given enough context for people who have been here telling me that I was harsh on my parents. Anyway, as I said, my parents wanted me back in their life. They said it was because they wanted to be a part of my graduation day, and it was a proud moment for them. I said, "I don't want you. Guys, on my big day, where were you guys? Busy with your new families, I guess." That's right, when they kept pushing. I said, "Okay, but I didn't invite them. I thought they would reach out again as graduation day got closer. I even got extra hall tickets for them, in case they showed up uninvited. But they didn't. They forgot about it and went to the convocation. I strictly asked her not to reveal the dates to my parents. It is almost, hey guys, where were you on my big day? Were you busy with your new family?" That's right, when they persisted further. I said, "Okay, but I didn't invite them. I thought they would reach out to me as graduation day approached. I even got extra hall tickets for them, in case they showed up uninvited. But they didn't. They forgot about it and attended the convocation. I strictly asked her not to reveal the dates to my parents. It's almost a month now since my graduation, but none of them called me to check for the dates. So, my graduation was just an excuse for them to have me back in their lives. Here's a new update. Almost 2.5 months after my graduation day, Mom called me and said my half-sister had graduated from primary school, and now they have put her in a private elementary school. However, they have a shortage of funds and they want me to pitch in. I was flabbergasted. It's been over a month since my graduation, but none of them have called to check the dates. So, my graduation was just an excuse for them to have me back in their lives. Here's the latest update. Almost 2.5 months after my graduation, my mom called and said my half-sister had graduated from elementary school and now they've put her in a private elementary school. However, they don't have enough money and they want me to pitch in. I was flabbergasted when she said that. I asked why and she said she was my sister so she should be able to go to school. She didn't waste any time getting straight to the point. She said, "We know that your aunt gave you the $1 million from her inheritance. Of course you did." She continued, "Your sister needs you. This is your time to step up as a big brother." I stopped her right there. "Hello, delusional you. I have never seen that sister you're talking about. Where were you when I asked why, she said she was my sister and that I should fund her education. She didn't beat around the bush. She said, 'We know that your aunt has given away her $1 million inheritance money to you. Of course you do. Your sister needs you. This is your time to step up as a big brother.'" I cut her off. "Hello, delusional. You. I have never seen that sister you're talking about. Where were you when I needed my mom when I was sick and cold? You were nowhere." She started sobbing and said, "What can I say? If you are still stuck in the past, I thought you had a huge sum of money. What are you going to do with it?" She asked, "So what's better than your sister getting educated in a private school?" I wanted to say a lot, but I didn't. I said I have plans for that money, and I cannot spare a penny for anyone else. She hung up the phone after that. I was sick and she didn't come to my aid. I was in desperate need of her support. I called my friend, a lawyer who was in his final year of law school. He wasn't a lawyer yet, but he was still able to help. He asked me what I was thinking. I said, "What can I say? You're stuck in the past. I thought you had a lot of money. What are you going to do with it? What's better than your sister getting an education at a private school?" I wanted to say more, but I didn't. I told him I had plans for that money, and I couldn't spare any for anyone else. She hung up. She didn't even ask me about the graduation day. I was right. Their rekindled love was only for money. I was still processing it when one day I got a call from a bank. They wanted me to pay for my dad's defaulted mortgage. I asked where they got my number. They said Dad gave it to them. Dad had taken a personal loan and didn't pay the mortgage for a few months. When they came hunting for him, he asked them to contact. I was a bit panicky because I didn't really know how it worked. I thought maybe I was legally responsible for paying off his debt since we were the sons. Thankfully, I didn't cave under the pressure and told them I'd have to check with my dad first. I called my lawyer friend, who wasn't a lawyer but was in his final year of law school. I was a bit panicky at first because I had no idea how the process worked. I thought I might be legally obligated to pay his debt since we're related. Thankfully, I didn't cave to the pressure and told them I'd need to check with my dad first instead of talking to him. I called my lawyer friend, who wasn't a lawyer but knew the felonies quite well. He said no, I wasn't legally bound. I asked him, "Then how come the bank called me for the money?" He said the recovery agent has the leverage to recover the amount from anyone who wants to pay on the debtor's behalf, but I can refuse at any time. I didn't call Dad after that. I knew he'd plead with me to pay for his mortgage, knowing it wasn't my responsibility. I waited for the bank to call me again. He said no, I wasn't legally obligated. I asked him, "So why did the bank call me for the money?" He said the recovery agent has the leverage to recover the amount from anyone who wants to pay on the defaulter's behalf, but I can refuse at any time. I didn't call Dad after that. I knew he would plead with me to pay for his mortgage, knowing it wasn't my responsibility. I waited for the bank to call me again. They called after a week and asked when I would be giving them the money. The recovery agent has certain assertive tones to scare off people. I was intimidated by it the first time, but this time I hung up. I said, "Who gave you the right to talk to me like this? I didn't default on the mortgage. You better watch your tone, and I am not going to pay a penny. You can contact the person who defaulted, not me." They said sorry and hung up. They called after a week and asked when I would be paying them. The recovery agent's tone was pretty intimidating, like he was trying to scare me. I was intimidated by it the first time, but this time I was ready for it. I told them, "Who gave you the right to talk to me like this? I didn't default on the mortgage, so don't talk to me that way. You better watch your tone, or I'm not paying a penny. You can contact the person who defaulted, not me." They apologized and hung up. I didn't need to school them yet, but I did it so they could unleash their anger on the original defaulter, my dad. A couple of hours later, I got a call from my dad's wife. Sorry, I can't call her mom or even stepmom. She was yelling at me. She was asking what I told the recovery officers that they got so mad. They got so mad they took Dad by his collar and asked him to pay the mortgage or else they would break his bones. I didn't say anything and just told them to go after the original defaulter instead of me. But then my dad's wife started yelling at me, saying how could I not have any heart for my dad, who's struggling to pay the mortgage, and how I'm the one who's got all the money and not helping him. I told her that I don't have any heart for him because he didn't have any for me. He has his heart for you and your boys, so why don't you guys chip in? I'm sure you can. He would have taken that money for you people. She hung up. That same night, Dad called me. He was drunk, not angry, but sobbing. He said he was sorry for his mistakes, that he didn't treat me right in front of his stepsons. He said several other things, basically implying how sorry he was, and that he has realized his mistakes and wants to make things right. That I said I don't want to talk about my past and I definitely don't want to have. He was remorseful and begged for my forgiveness. I told him I'm done with the past and don't want them back. I said sorry, but remorse doesn't matter to me. I've learned to live without them, and I want to keep it that way. I'm not sure if I did the right thing by denying him the money. I feel bad that he was chased by bank officials. I even think this could be a setup to emotionally blackmail me for money. If he asked, he said he was sorry and asked me to forgive him. I said sorry, but remorse doesn't matter to me anymore. I've learned to live without them, and I'd like to keep it that way. I don't know if I did the right thing by denying him the money. I do feel bad that he was chased by bank officials. I even think this is all staged to emotionally blackmail me for money. If he had asked me directly, I would have refused, like I did with my mom. What do you guys think? Update. 3 Thanks for the valuable comment. Some of you were right that it wouldn't have hurt me to cover for his couple of months of mortgage. I thought so too. But you know what? They don't deserve it. After writing the last update, I felt so remorseful that I was about to call Dad and ask how much money he needed. But before that, I told Mom I'd decline the offer, and she said she'd be happy to host a dinner for 3, just the 3 of us. Me, Dad, and her. I wasn't too keen on the idea of revisiting the past, but I accepted the invitation. I was hoping to put an end to this saga. When I arrived, they were saying the same things Dad had mentioned the other day. Sorry, apologies, remorse, forgiveness, and getting back together. I got a message from Mom inviting me over for dinner. It said, "Sorry we couldn't make it to your graduation day, so I want to do this for you. Just 3 of us, me, Dad, and you, like old times." I wasn't really into reminiscing about the old family times, but I accepted the invite. I showed up, and they were saying the same thing that Dad was saying the other day. Sorry, apologies, remorse, forgiveness, and getting back together. As a family, I just played along, nodded, and smiled. I wanted to see where it would go. Out of nowhere, Mom said, "Baby, we were wondering what plans you have for the money." I looked at her, and she said, "No, I mean, Dad and I could suggest you some good investment advice. You are pretty young to take this decision on your own." I casually said, "Yeah, and is he helping me with that? So I'm good, thanks." Silence prevailed for the next few minutes. She made a comeback and so, we're all eating dinner and she starts going on about how Brad's always trying to get attention and how he only cares about himself. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. I'm the one who's always trying to get attention. And then she says, "Mom, can we talk about this somewhere else?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So I look at her and go, "Mom, what are your plans for the money?" And she's like, "No, I mean, Dad and I could suggest some good investment advice." I'm like, "Yeah, and I'm glad you're helping me with that." Then she says, "You know, Dad's been in trouble because he defaulted on the mortgage." And I'm like, I know. But Dad, why did you take that personal loan for business? And he looks down and says, for my son's college. And I'm like, whatever, whatever. The point is Dad's in trouble and we have to help him. And then Mom's like, hey, why don't you clear off his mortgage? And his stepson will pay you back once they get. I said, hey, I know Dad's been having some financial issues lately. He took out a personal loan for a business, and he's been struggling with the mortgage. Mom cut me off and said, no matter what the reason is, Dad's having a hard time, and we need to support him. I thought, why don't you take care of the mortgage, and your stepbrother will pay you back once he gets a job and has some extra cash. You can give the rest to me. I remember I said, your half-sister needs to go to a private school. She'll pay you back when she gets older and starts earning. I replied, how about we just have dinner and call it a day? She got really upset and yelled that I was still that attention-seeking Brad who only cared about myself. I said, yeah, that's exactly what I am. I could have given them a lecture about their behavior. I said, fine, I'll give you the money for my stepbrother's loan and my half-sister's private education, but you give me my half of the dinner bill. My stepsister lost it. She yelled that I was still the attention-seeking Brad who only cared about himself. I said, yeah, that's what I am. I could have lectured them about their behavior, but who wants to waste time on them? They know I have an education loan to pay off, but they still want me to give my money for my stepbrother's loan and my half-sister's private education, and work hard to pay off my own loan. I said, I'm done with you guys. I was right. You guys came back in my life only for money. And you know what? Suck it up. You don't get a penny. I left the table, leaving my I'm so over it. I tried to help them out, but they wouldn't have it. They knew I had an education loan to pay off, but they still wanted me to give them money for their loan and their half-sister's private education. I said I was done with you guys, and I was right. You guys came back in my life only for money. And you know what? Suck it up. You don't get a penny. I left the table, leaving my share of the dinner bill on the table. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My wife blindsided me with a divorce after 10 years of multiple affairs. Now, she wants me back, but I've already moved on with someone new. My wife, 35F, and I, 38M, were married for 10 years with 2 elementary AED kids. The first 7 years of the marriage were 1010 incredible, at least from my point of view. I could not asked for a better wife and mother. The last 3 years have been much tougher. We went to a bunch of counseling trying to get the marriage back on track, but we never really got there. I planned countless dates, read and listened to everything on improving a marriage. It helped, but there was a gap between us. I could never seem to close it, no matter how hard I tried. In the back half of last year, she blindsided me with a divorce. I deeply loved her. I asked for a better wife and mother, and the last 3 years have been really tough. We went to a bunch of counseling sessions trying to save our marriage, but we never really got there. I planned a lot of dates, read and listened to everything on improving a marriage. It helped, but there was still a gap between us. I could never seem to close it, no matter how hard I tried. In the second half of last year, she blindsided me with a divorce. I deeply loved her and was devastated. I tried my best to talk her out of it, but she waffled a bit and ultimately insisted on moving forward. I never got a great answer as to why she filed. I wasn't a perfect husband, to be clear. I had my faults. I could have done better, but I never cheated, was never abusive, and was a great provider. I was 100% in on trying to save the marriage in any case. She was really bummed out when she filed. I tried to talk her out of it, but she insisted on moving forward. I never really got a straight answer about why she filed. I wasn't a perfect husband, but I was my best. I could have done better, but I never cheated, I was never abusive, and I was a great provider. I was 100% in on trying to save the marriage. A little more than a month after she filed, she was already seeing someone. A month after that, she had introduced our kids to him. Then, later during the discovery phase of the divorce process, she confessed to having multiple affairs. Starting at about the 7-year mark, one of them lasted at least a year, though she claimed it amounted to only a handful of actual encounters. I had no clue she was even capable of this. The amount of lying she did to keep all this hidden was unbelievable. About a month after she filed, she was already seeing someone. Then, a month after that, she had introduced our kids to him. Then, later on, during the discovery phase of the divorce process, she confessed to having multiple affairs, starting around the 7-year mark. One of them lasted at least a year, though she claimed it amounted to only a handful of actual encounters. I had no idea she was even capable of this. The amount of lying she did to keep all this hidden is truly incredible. The day I found out was the worst day of my life, but at least I finally understood why we had such difficulty connecting the last few years. It wasn't for lack of trying on my part. Fast forward 6 months and nearly $100,000 in lawyer bills later, and she decides she wants to try and reconcile. Mind you, she's still dating the same guy, but she tells me she'll dump him too. I was floored when I found out. It was the worst day of my life, but at least I finally understood why we had such a hard time connecting over the last few years. I tried my best. Fast forward 6 months and nearly $100,000 in lawyer bills later, and she decides she wants to try to reconcile. She's still dating the same guy, but she tells me she'll dump him to work on things with me. So what caused her change of heart? I think it might be because she found out I had started dating someone awesome, or possibly because she realized how much her financial life was going to change with my high income. On her part, she claims it was because she saw how great of a dad I was being when I had our kids. I sat down with her and heard her out on everything. I felt it felt like the least I could do after 10 years of marriage. She took responsibility for her mistakes and apologized, but blamed me for pushing her to cheat. I get it, but I didn't accept the idea of blaming me for her infidelity. In the end, I told her no and moved forward with the divorce, which was finalized as of after 10 years. I guess I owed her that much. She took responsibility for her mistakes and apologized, but she was also partly blaming me for pushing her to cheat. There are two sides to every story, and I get that. But I rejected the idea of blaming me for her cheating. I told her no and finalized the divorce a few weeks ago. Since then, she's been relentless, texting almost daily. It's been hard to see someone I cared so much about, filled with regret and hurting so badly. I've held firm, but there's just too much damage. I don't think I could ever trust her again. Also, I have this great new girlfriend who's beautiful inside and out. She's been so supportive and patient. To be clear, we met well after I had been served papers. Writing this out makes all of this seem crazy to me. Who in their right mind would try to save a marriage like this? Who in their right mind would even have the guts to ask to try and fix it? I don't love her anymore, but I did love her for so long. The kids, the co-parenting, I'll never really get away from that. She's been really supportive and patient. To be clear, we met well after I'd been served papers. Typing this out makes the craziness of the situation clear. Who in their right mind would try to save a marriage like this? Who in their right mind would even have the guts to ask to try and fix it? I don't love her anymore, but I did love her for so long. The kids, co-parenting, it'll never really get away from me. It's hard to get away from this woman. I'm not sure why I'm posting this. Maybe just to get some validation. Am I making the right call? Has anyone been through something like this before? Any advice or comments? 33 said she would dump him, but only after you say yes. What part of you aren't planned? Is she not getting up? I've been tempted to tell the other guy how little she thinks of. I'm not sure why I'm posting this. Maybe just to get some validation. Am I making the right call? Has anyone been through something like this before? Any advice or comments? 33. She says she'll dump him, but only after you say yes. What part of you isn't planned? Is she not getting up? I've been tempted to tell the other guy how little she thinks of him, but then I'm afraid she'd double down on trying to get back with me. Plus, he's way older than her, so I get a little satisfaction out of the fact that it must be pretty gross. I guess that's probably petty on my end. Cutesy Worthiness 366. She is selfish and delusional. Be proud of yourself that you tried your best. Have dignity. Did the right decision. Are still civil with her salacious nada. Pick. Look, you've been through some of the toughest experiences imaginable, and you're still standing strong. Why reopen the wounds and relive all that pain and heartache? If she could handle it once and keep it under wraps, she can handle it again. And if she's not interested in reconciliation for your sake, she's doing it for her own selfish reasons. Just move on, don't look back. focus on the future.